Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 o'clock on March 6th, 2018, and we'll call our St. Croix County Board of Supervisors to order. And at this time, we'll have an invocation by Tim Sackett, Transport for Christ. Everybody stand, please.
Good evening once again. I will start this evening by saying that within the church circles, one of the things that we like is to hear confessions, so I'm here with a confession. I asked one of the Somerset pastors to be here at 9 a.m. this morning. And he was. And you weren't. And so he let me know that he had to pick up his wife from work at 5 o'clock in Woodbury, and since he can't be in two places at one time, I am here to cover up my mistake. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll seek forgiveness, and I don't know what kind of penance you guys can put on me, but you'll get to it, I'm sure. It'll be a topic of discussion. Make me stay for the full meeting? Is that what you said? So, you know, I just want to say that my wife works in Hudson, in an assisted living center, and deals and works with the aging. And my daughter will soon be graduating from WITC and working in a nonprofit working with a disability. And I have a brother who drives a snowplow truck. And I think about all the burden, all the work that goes on in here, and how it touches not so much my life, but extended family, that everybody is just reaping the benefits of the work that's done in meetings like this, when we think about the roads that we have and the aging and disability and all the things that are done. And so you guys have quite a burden. You do the hard work of shouldering the burden, because as a leader, you know, the first thing you make a commitment to, the first question is, how much is this going to cost? You know, it happens in the church, it happens at home, it happens everywhere. As soon as a leader makes a decision, somebody wants to know what the cost is going to be. And you know what? The cost isn't always in money. The cost is in bearing these burdens. And we're soon going to be celebrating Easter. We're in the middle of Lent. And I think about the cost that Jesus bore for us. And the cost was tremendous, and he paid it all. And Psalm 103 says that we should bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits. And I think as citizens of St. Croix County, we also should be reminded of all of the benefits that we have because of the burdens that you carry for us in decisions and meetings. And so with that, let's pray. Great Lord God, we thank you for leadership. We thank you for Jesus being the supreme example of what it means to be a leader, and to put everything on the line and to pay the price that was needed to be paid for us who have sinned against you and are seeking forgiveness. We just thank you that Jesus paid that price, the burden that he bore. We will be celebrating in about just less than a month from now. We will be in the midst of a celebration of the burden and the price, and then also the joy, the immense joy of your resurrection. So with that, Lord, I just want to pray for the group here today, for everyone in this room that has a burden to bear on behalf of the citizens in St. Croix County. And we should also forget not all the benefits that we have because of the decisions that are made in this room. So we intercede for them in prayer and anticipation of living a healthy, quality life here in St. Croix County. For that we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tim. Will everybody join me in pledge allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Cindy, we'll have roll call, please. We have a few people missing tonight. I think And they're all excused, the ones that are missing, so thank you, everyone. We're open for public comment at this time. If anybody from the public wants to speak on something on or off the agenda, and we limit it to 3 minutes if you have something to say. So at this time, we have
My name is Ben Fox. I reside at 680 County Road M. I really don't want to be here. I'd rather be at home minding my own business. However, a situation has arisen over the last 3 years that is just taxing on me. Half of my parcel that I reside in is in the city of River Falls. The other half is in the town of Troy. And instead of being responsible to the people that elect them, I have found that there's a severe disagreement between the two. And that affects me because I knew that it was going to happen. But the fact that court resources in St. Croix County, time and effort of lawyers and engineers over a small chunk of road has led to such disagreement. So a lot of you guys know the situation, and I just ask you guys solve it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still open for public comment. Anybody else have anything they want to say on or off the agenda? Still open for public comment. Last time, we're open for public comment. If anybody has anything to say on or off the agenda. Not seeing anything? Thank you. We'll move forward. We have the consent agenda, the minutes from the previous meeting, February 8th. And then we have, we didn't have a date in there for the next meeting, but we have a couple of dates we should put in there. And April 10th is one of them for the county board orientation session for April 10th. And then we have another one for April 17th at 9 a.m., which is the organizational meeting for setting up committees and voting on county board chair and vice chair and that. So if you want to write those in there, is there anybody that has a problem with writing those dates in there?
I will not be here on the 10th. I'll be out in Seattle, so.
Okay. Supervisor Babbitt.
Roger, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what time on April
At
10th?
9 o'clock, 9 a.m. on both of those
On
dates.
both dates, okay.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Coulter?
And we're not having a meeting on the 3rd, is that correct?
The 3rd, we won't have a meeting. That's
Okay.
canceled. That's election day. So we won't have that date. Supervisor Berkey?
My question was, why isn't it at 5? The meeting at 5?
Well, we had some problems with some of the supervisors having board meetings that date, so that's why the 9 o'clock time. Okay. Any other questions? Discussion? If not, we'll vote on that. What? I need a motion for that. Supervisor Coulter, second from Supervisor Schoberg. And now we'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. We have presentation recognition. We'll turn this over to our administrator, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. First of all, we have a recognition this evening and then an appointment to be made. The first is recognition for Bob Midditt, who is retiring at the end of this month as the county's finance director. Bob's been with us almost 6 years. I think it's it's very close to 6 years. And Bob will be retiring at the end of the month. And so I wanted to, on behalf of the county board chairman and members of the board, recognize Bob for his 6 years of service in appreciation. This certificate is appreciated to Bob Middett in grateful appreciation for 6 years of loyal and dedicated service to St. Croix County. Our sincere gratitude is extended to you this 6th day of March, 2018, signed by myself, Bob, and also Roger Larson, the county board chair. Congratulations. You want to say a couple words?
Well, mostly I just want to say thank you. I've enjoyed working with all of you and with working with Pat, working with all the staff here at the county. It's the opportunity to retire from probably the best place I've worked in my career is special to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Won't you miss those audits, though? No. The next agenda item, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, is an appointment of a new department head. I'd like to recommend the appointment of Lisa Plunkett as the new child support administrator. And Lisa has 12 years of service with St. Croix County. She started off as a child support specialist 1, worked her way up to the child support specialist 2 position, and we're very happy to be able to recommend her appointment to the board as the new child support administrator. And she'll be taking over for Chad Wolski. As you know, Chad served as director for the last 4 years and has decided to go back into the trenches. We get to keep him, but he is going to take over the position of child support specialist 2. And Lisa will take the place as Chad's new boss. And this is all going to take place March 21st. Lisa could not be here this evening. She's on a much needed vacation in Florida, someplace nice and warm, before she takes over on the 21st of March. So Chad Wolski, I believe, is here, right there. So I don't know if Chad, you wanted to say anything, but you know, as long as he is here, I would like to thank Chad for his 4 years of leadership in the department. And as you're well aware, because I've announced on several occasions that Chad has been here to receive honors from the state of Wisconsin in terms of the performance of the child support agency here in St. Croix County. And that's a direct, you know, credit to not only Chad and his leadership, but all the staff, the child support specialists, ones and twos in the department that work very hard to meet those performance standards. So Chad, you know, thank you. I'm glad that you've decided to stay here. So we'll still reap the benefits of your experience, and then also would like to recommend formally the appointment of Lisa, which you will need to vote on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need a motion to Supervisor Osmus.
So moved.
Need a second, Supervisor Nelson. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. We have a motion and second on the floor. We will vote at this time. That's all yeses. Thank you. We're up to our annual reports. First one's Corporation Counsel, Scott Cox.
Some of you may have watched the Oscars the other night. There was a prize for the shortest speech, a jet ski. I'm not trying to do that, but you have my report in your packet. Do you have any questions? Yeah, give me a jet ski. Thank you.
Human Resources.
Let's see if you can top that.
Sorry, I thought I had to, have a couple minutes here. But good evening, thank you for your time tonight. I am going to be quick. I wanted to just briefly speak to a couple of the updates on the report, and then, of course, take any questions. So without any objections, I'll go ahead and get right to that. I think we recognized a lot of accomplishments in 2017. We were a very new team. We're starting to recognize some tenure now. I think our most tenured person is 1.5 years. And our team has been together now for almost 11 months. So we're getting some consistency, and so that's a great thing to see. Some of the other accomplishments, there's one of those that was noted on the report, was about the quarterly leadership trainings that we offer. So we provided 4 trainings last year. Those were on various topics. The topics were decided by soliciting feedback from the leadership team through a survey to find out what their interests were, and then also based on what administration also wanted to see. One of the trainings we offered was a combination. It was on ADA, FMLA, workers' compensation, and then also a public records request or open records law. And then we provided training on change management, also on managing conflict, and then the other one we provided was on how to handle difficult conversations. We provided the trainings both internally and externally. So the internal resources that were used was Human Resources, provided some of the training. Corporation Counsel also did, and then our operations manager. The external resources we used were Real Living. They are our EAP provider. They came in and did a training for us. And then we were lucky enough to bring in a person called Karen Black with Insight Edge. She owns her own leadership consulting company. And one of our staff members had seen her present and was very impressed, and so invited her in. She also was highly recommended from the city of River Falls, because she works very closely with them on their leadership development. So that was the trainings. We'll continue to do that in 2018, provide those quarterly leadership trainings. Another accomplishment I just wanted to mention was a JD project. One of the HR staff, Ashley Knoll, who is here, majority of the team is back here today, and she's been the primary lead on that, working very hard with McGrath Consulting to update every single job description in the county. That project is complete. We're just doing some housekeeping on it right now, and then we'll have all of the job descriptions posted on the bridge for all employees to view. Additionally, we did a lot of recruiting and hiring. Ashley Zhang, a lot of you may have interacted with her. She is our HR specialist who does the majority of our recruiting. Again, she is here as well today. We had 125 new hires, and we attended 5 major recruiting events. We like to think we recognize some successes from those recruiting events. You don't always get a lot of applicants, but at least it's exposure and it's networking. We did have a couple people say that were our final candidates that did come to us from one of the recruiting events. And then health and wellness initiatives. We really did a hard emphasis on that this past year. Susan Flores-Diaz is a shared resource. She supports both administration and HR. She's done a miraculous job working with the Health and Wellness Committee to try to bring different challenges each month, make sure we're up to date on different health and wellness initiatives that are going on, and really helping with that communication. So those are the main ones I'll touch on. I did want to just mention, in case there's a question on it, there is a budget variance you'll see from the 2017 actual levy to the 2018 budgeted levy. And we talked about this at one of the other committee meetings, but that's primarily due to a resource being moved from the finance team to, from the HR team to the finance team early 2017. So then I'll end. Not quite as short as Corporation Counsel, but are there any questions that I can answer?
Supervisor Croix.
Yeah, I just have one, because I know tonight we have 2 positions where we're saying to increase their wages to bring them up to be equitable. How many other positions are there that haven't been looked at that may still come up? Do you have any idea, or are we totally all caught up at this
Right.
point?
I want to say I believe we should be caught up because I know we did a lot of work with McGrath, Dr. McGrath, and prior to my time. So I feel like there may be one-offs as the markets change, as different variables factored in, but I feel like we probably should be pretty up to date on those based on the work we did with McGrath Consulting. Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Now we go on to administration annual report. Administrator Thompson.
Yes, I'm going to try to beat Scott. Reports in the packet, any questions? And I watched parts of the Oscars, and I heard that one of the Oscar awards was stolen. So no one's going to steal your award. Yes, that's a good question. So, no other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on. Now the financial report. Administration.
Yes, you should have the financial reports in your packet. It represents 1 month of financial activity, revenues, and expenditures. Very preliminary. It's only the first month, so it doesn't tell us a lot yet. We're still working on preliminary year-end figures for 2017, and we should have those reports probably within the next month or two, unaudited year-end reports. Any questions?
Any questions? Supervisor Schoberg.
Yeah, I think we're getting used to seeing those monthly CIP reports too, to show the progress of what projects are being worked on. I didn't see this or that report. Is that part of a package that I missed?
Bob?
Bob?
No, the report wasn't put in here. Normally, this time of the year is always difficult with cutoff between the old year and the new year. This year is particularly more difficult because of the fact we're switching systems. And to answer the question on the capital report, we haven't found a report yet that provides us with the breakdown from one project to the other. So the information is in there, we're just having trouble getting it out.
Any other questions? Supervisor Hanson.
When will we be getting that report, do you think?
I would expect we'll have it for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any? Thank you. We'll move forward. With our new business, we have an ordinance amending Chapter 42, Human Health Hazards of St. Croix County Code of Ordinance. Do I have a motion from Supervisor Babbitt, second for Supervisor Coulter? Supervisor Babbitt, you want to go through that a little bit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As all of you know, we took a very close look at a number of St. Croix County ordinances, and in particular, Chapter 42, which had to do with human health hazards. We approved much of that code of ordinances back in May, but Supervisor Peavy had a few terrific and important questions to ask about the application of the human health hazards portion of the ordinances regards some issues within the ag community, which he brought to us at an HHS meeting recently. We took a careful look at that and made some changes in the ordinance that are posted here in the packet. And so I'm recommending that we move ahead and approve those changes to the ordinance, which we took some time with and I think are a positive addition to the chapter. So we would appreciate support of the motion.
Thank you. Any questions? Supervisor Actroff.
Boy, lots of questions this time. For Part 12, Section 212, when it says inoperable vehicles and vehicle parts, it says it shall not apply to that. Well, then what happens to those inoperable vehicles and vehicle parts? Because I looked through it and I didn't see anything that I mean, if they sell the farm and they're just there and they've been there for 50 years, is there any time limit or anything where people have to do something with them?
That's a very good question. I'm not actually sure what the answer is to that. I think if Supervisor Peavy wants to speak to that, you should certainly feel free to do so. But essentially, I think what we wanted to do was make sure that they were the responsibility of the landowner, rather than having the county or another agency come in and essentially take care of that from a county perspective. But Supervisor Peavy, if you have anything to add to that, please
Supervisor Peavy?
jump in.
Yeah, I think the intent was to allow machinery to be used for parts. And, a lot of vehicles that are sitting there on farms are parts vehicles. And, I guess at one point, we never did discuss at what point they would actually have to, something would happen, but the idea was to allow parts to be available for vehicles, for agricultural use, and it says that in there as normal part of farming operation. And my computer is updating, so I can't read the wording, but that was the idea.
Any other questions?
I think so when the land stops being used for agricultural or farming purposes, then this exception no longer applies. But there is no other cutoff other than qualified by farming operations.
Supervisor Octorara.
So is there something in there so that if someone would sell I mean, this is happening all the time where farms are being sold to non-farmers, or I don't know if they look at, so is there something that states that in the sale of it, it has to be disclosed that it will be the purchaser's responsibility to take care of inoperable vehicles and vehicle parts, since it's no longer a farm? I mean, I don't know. I'm just bringing out an area that didn't seem to be covered and wasn't sure how that was being handled.
Supervisor Schoberg.
The buyer would hire a good lawyer. And they would deal with that in the purchase agreement. And then the problem would be resolved.
Mr.
Or else
Chairman.
the seller would hire a good lawyer, one of the two.
Mr. Chairman. Under section C12 of chapter 42, it states, inoperable vehicles and vehicle parts, outdoor storage of abandoned, unlicensed, or inoperable vehicles, or outdoor storage of motor vehicles or vehicle parts, except for those properties that have permits to operate a junkyard or salvage yard, or are commercial sellers of vehicles and/or vehicle parts. And so therefore, we're covering the language on abandoned vehicles or vehicle parts, which is separate from actual farm equipment, which may be utilized for parts. And any farmer doing their due diligence is not going to have rotting machinery on their property. So I don't see that this should be a contention, as we have covered the language.
Any other questions? Supervisor Berkey.
The question had to do with what is the authority of the township in a situation in that farms are in townships?
I think towns theoretically can have their own junk ordinances, separate and distinct from zoning, but certainly I think if they're within county zoning, they rely on the county ordinance, the county zoning ordinance to regulate it. So there could be some overlap.
Supervisor Hanson.
I'm looking at number 16, and I'm concerned about unsafe structure. It seems to be suggesting that we are just going to require that a fencing or closure to entryways and dilapidated buildings be adequate. We have buildings across county that are collapsed, falling down, dangerous structures, which are really very attractive to young people, kids, and we have rural areas that have been encroached upon by housing and children who live nearby, and these structures really are. We had a person during public comment at my committee, the Community Development Committee, who talked about this very thing at our last meeting, because there's a barn nearby where she lives that children seem to be playing in, and the thing is half fallen down, and it's quite dangerous. And I'm wondering, shouldn't we require people to take down structures that are no longer useful, that are falling down, that are dangerous?
Supervisor Peavy?
And thank the Supervisor Babbitt and the committee. We discussed that at the Health and Human Services meeting. And we tried for quite a while to come up with some language that was better than in here, and we failed. And the language that is in here is the best that the Mayans present at that meeting could come up with. So it's a very difficult situation when you're talking about, ag buildings that are falling down, what you might consider falling down, I store machinery in. So we left the language as is because we thought it was the best that we could come up with.
Supervisor Ard?
At that meeting where we were having the discussion regarding dilapidated buildings, my point was, these buildings are on private property, and so any children, youth, or adult who may be on that property would be trespassing. Therefore, the language should stand. As Supervisor Peavy has pointed out, there are many farmers who use their former chicken coops and/or barns or other buildings on their property to store farm equipment and/or other items used for the purpose of farming. It should not be our business to interfere with what they are doing on their property.
Supervisor Hanson?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not talking about something being merely unsightly. I'm talking about something being structurally unsound and dangerous. I understand that older buildings, especially on a farm, are going to be worn-looking, and that's not what I'm concerned about. And I understand that certain, community that's new and shiny, they may think that that's something that's not aesthetic. Well, that's not my personal opinion. I love farms and I love farm buildings, and I agree with Bill. What some people think is junk, he parks his equipment in, and I love. But I'm talking about buildings that truly are dangerous. Buildings that are structurally unsound, that have main members falling in. That's what I'm talking about. And the particular structure that came up at my committee meeting is one of those buildings. And we do know that those buildings exist. Yes, they're on private property, but don't we have an obligation to regulate health hazards within the community?
Supervisor Nelson?
Does this usually, this is for Corporation Council, if there's an issue with something like this, doesn't it usually start at the township level before it even goes to the county? If they're underneath our ordinances, do they take care of that first? Because if it's a township thing, I don't like the overreach of the county coming over top of them. I'd soon have the township take care of it. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe Bill can speak to that. I don't know.
Well, this ordinance is enforced by public health within HHS. There could be other ordinances in effect, so what happens is that there would be a complaint or alert regarding a situation, and public health could in fact work with the town. Towns may have separate authority to placard and demolish a building, but we're working within the confines of what the county can do, and this would be a situation in which the public health officer would deal with. I'm not certain what the town would do. I know towns have placarded buildings and ordered the abatement and demolition of buildings. They have the authority to do that if they're exercising, I think, village powers.
Any other questions? Not Supervisor Matter.
I just had a question. As you were developing the language for 6, the toxic or hazardous material, my question is around material that is properly managed, and that word properly. I would assume, I'm just questioning that, was there any discussion around that? And then when we're reviewing it, if it is our public health inspector, they would determine if it's properly stored, managed in the course of normal farming operations. Just wanted to ask that question.
Supervisor Babbitt.
Yeah, I think I can address that, but obviously open to input from anyone else who would care. to have input on that. Yeah, I think our feeling was, in responding to Supervisor Peavy's concerns, was that the proper management, storing, et cetera, is fundamentally the responsibility of the landowner. But if we were to receive a complaint, then a public health officer would potentially go to the site and work with that landowner to make a decision about whether in fact things are being properly managed. But it's not designed to keep the county out necessarily, but rather to put the responsibility on the landowner.
All right, thanks.
Any other, Supervisor Peavy?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with Supervisor Babbitt said. Yeah, that's exactly the intent was to, if somebody has a complaint that something isn't stored properly, then the health department would investigate. But they're not going to investigate if it's stored properly. So, I was saying we'd quit. But yeah, I think that was the intent, to keep keep normal use as normal use, and if things get out of control, then health department would investigate and contact the DNR or whatever agency was responsible for that particular hazard, if it's a chemical or a fertilizer or pesticide, whatever. That would be my explanation.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote on this. And that was all yeses. Thank you. Moving on to number 2, it's a resolution establishing compensation for elected officials, the sheriff, and the clerk of courts. I have a motion to that. Supervisor Schoberg, second for Supervisor Babbitt. Supervisor Schoberg, would you like to go over that?
No. I'd like the county administrator to talk about it, because his presentation at the administration committee convinced us all to put it forward here, and he did a good job then, and I'll ask him to repeat his performance now.
Well, thank you. Members of the board, every 4 years, the board by statute has to establish the compensation levels for your elected officials. In this case, it's the sheriff and the clerk of court, whose terms are up in 2019. And statute dictates that the county board of supervisors must establish the level of compensation prior to nomination papers being circulated for those 2 positions. And so that is at this meeting that we will take this up. What you have before you is a recommendation for compensation levels for the sheriff and clerk of court for 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. The board can establish the level of compensation for each year of the term. Once it's set, it cannot be reduced, and so it's or increased. So it's set for the full 4 years. What we did was we looked at the 14 county comparables used in the McGrath study. This was the wage study that the board approved 2 years ago. In that study, the consultant used 14 comparable counties to St. Croix County. So we used the same 14 county comparables recommended by Dr. McGrath. We also looked at statewide averages for the positions, the sheriff and the clerk of court. We looked at internal compression between those 2 positions and the chief deputy positions for both the sheriff and the clerk of court. And then also the fact that when the board set these salaries 4 years ago, the board set it at the level that it did, and it remained constant for the 4 years. In other words, the board 4 years ago, when they set the salaries, they did not establish an annual increase for the sheriff and the clerk of court. So the recommendation this year includes an annual 2% increase. After the first year, after we established the salaries for 2019, it contemplates a 2% increase for the years 2020, 21, and 22. So those were the factors that the Human Resources Department and administration looked at in making this recommendation to the Administration Committee at their last meeting. The committee took this recommendation up, and I believe it was a unanimous vote of the committee to forward this to the full county board for your consideration. Sheriff Knudsen is here this evening. The clerk of court, Christy Severson, could not be here this evening, but she had a prior engagement, so she couldn't be here. That is our recommendation. I don't know if there are any questions.
Just a comment. You answered the question to the administration committee at our last meeting as to who all participated in the discussion on setting or recommending this increase by 6.5%, kind of as a catch-up. So I believe you had said Bob Middett and also Tara with the
Right, the finance department was involved, the human resources department, county administration, and then also there was a series of two meetings with the independently elected officials. I met with them, presented some information to Sheriff Knudsen and Clerk of Court Severson. They had some questions, some input that I received. I took it back under consideration and then also came up with this recommendation, bounced it off of both the elected officials, and I believe we're all in agreement on the same page in terms of consensus, in terms of a recommendation.
So personally, I have less trouble with a catch-up provision than I do with a forecasted increase. Do we have any statistics on how many other elected officials throughout the state have set increases per year going forward?
I do. It appears to me, based on the information that the Human Resource Department provided, that most counties contemplate an annual adjustment for the 4-year term. It varies widely, anywhere from 1% up to 3%. It varies, but most counties contemplate an annual adjustment, and because of the length of the term, the 4-year term, but it varies from 1% to 3%. I believe our adjustment is 2% annual adjustment, and that reflects the wage grid compensation, the average step increase on the wage grid. These positions are not on the McGrath wage study. They're not part of the wage grid, so they weren't part of the study. But we've tried to use the same methodology that Dr. McGrath used in setting compensation for the employees on the wage grid, and that's why we're making the recommendation that we are.
Supervisor Hanson.
Are we required to make this decision now, or can this county board, make an increase of 2% 2 years from now if they decide to?
Has to be set now.
It
has to be set by the end of this month, and it cannot be altered during the term of office.
That was my question. So it's now or never. Okay.
Supervisor Berkey.
I should know the answer to this, but I don't, so I'll just throw it out. With respect to the registered deeds, the county clerk, the treasurer, and maybe I left one out, those 3 positions, what is the, did we do we have a 2% for each of those
Yes.
positions?
When you
Is
set
that what
the-
we used?
When you set the salaries for the clerk, or the county clerk, treasurer, and register of deeds, there was an annual 2% increase.
Okay, then I think, I feel good about that. It's consistent. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Nelson?
Pat, when you talked about compression between the first deputy and the sheriff, what was the gap that you did between that? Because some people look at that, because I think the norm, especially where I work in public sector, it was 10% between that spot and the first deputy. Are we in that ballpark?
We will be. It'll be closer to 7%, but as the length of the term goes through 2019 through 2022, that gap should, it should be closer to 10%, and it will be. It all depends on what sort of salary adjustments the board grants through the budget process for employees on the wage grid. The chief deputy position is a position that will receive annual compensation adjustments based on the board and the budget. And so that's somewhat of an unknown. But the adjustments that we're making closes it contemplates separation between the chief elected official and their chief deputy, which currently does not exist in the sheriff's office. The chief deputy actually makes more than the sheriff, and so we're adjusting. This adjustment will also address that concern.
Supervisor Nelson?
Well, the reason I asked that question, if a lot of people don't know, that's a huge thing when you deal with the public protective services, dealing between the sheriff, the undersheriff, fire chief, deputy chief. That's a good thing to make sure you attract qualified candidates. Because a lot of times, and especially the first deputy is actually appointed by the sheriff, correct? So there's a lot of responsibility there too. So that's why we have to make sure that that 10% compression is something that you should attain, because then you keep wanting junior officers to move up to maybe aspire to, after Sheriff Knutson, retires. That's for them working hard, plus to retain our good quality employees. So I think that's a huge thing that we got to make sure we keep that compression and work to keep that space so that we can keep having good sheriffs as we've had in the past.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote on it this time. Thank you. That's all yeses. Move down to our next item, which is a resolution amending rules and bylaws. Do I have a motion to? Supervisor Berkey, do I have a second? Supervisor Babbitt. Anybody like to talk to that? It's in the packet. Are there any questions, or Supervisor Ochteroff?
Yeah, on page 39, 3E, where what's been crossed out for those not wishing to speak, it's not a question necessarily of they're not wishing to speak, they are unable to be here, so they have something written. And if it doesn't get read out loud, I don't know where it would be incorporated, but it wouldn't be at the same level as people hear it being just, said or read in public, just like we are right now. And I think that's almost discriminating against people that aren't going to be here.
Supervisor Schoberg.
Judy. So if someone has something profane to say or something that's not very pleasing to hear, would you like to read it if they don't show up? I wouldn't, and I know the chair doesn't want to read that. So if they want to make a public comment, then they should be here. And if they are here and they choose then not to say it out loud themselves, it will then be made a part of the record. So it's a public comment. It's not, please submit written comments in advance for our meeting. It's a public display and time to speak in open government.
Right, but sometimes people can't be here, and I also know that, and it's happened in my time here, that the board president has cut off people, because we do have rules concerning what can be said and spoken out loud. You don't make attacks, personal attacks or whatnot like that, and if in the middle of reading it, something like that would happen, you just stop reading and I say, this no longer is appropriate and it can't be done, or if it gets pre-read and determined. Because that should be no different than if anybody was talking and they would be cut off. It would be the same thing if something was written and what was in it was inappropriate. But I just feel that there are certain reasons why people can't be here and they feel they have something important to say, and I don't think it should be entered into public record in a different way than people who are here speaking.
Yes, Supervisor Ard.
I would have to agree with Supervisor Soberg is that this is public comment. And as many public comments as I have attended, and as many pieces of statement as I have read for persons who were unable to attend, there is always a way to find someone to bring your statement forth in this body. If you cannot make it to this body to present your statement, and you want it known to the public, then we have letters to the editor and the internet. We have emails for each and every supervisor here. There are a number of means which are almost unlimited for a person to get their message out. But to prescribe that the chair or any other member of this body would read a statement by another individual, I feel is a disservice to that individual, because none of us will read it with the same enthusiasm and/or disdain that that individual would read it with. And so therefore, if they are going to present to this body, then they should be here in person or have a representative to present on their behalf.
Any other questions?
So if they get someone here to read it, it's okay. It doesn't have to be them. It can be if they ask someone to read their, I don't know if that's in here or it's not, or if that's, just making, if that's.
Well, it doesn't need to be said, because if they're actually saying it during public comment, they're saying it.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote. And that's all yeses. Thank you. The next resolution we have is approving the county administrator goals report, establishing a rate period, and consideration of incentive compensation. Do I have a motion to approve that? Supervisor Schoberg, do I have a second? Supervisor Leepreet. Now, discussion. Supervisor Schoberg.
Sorry talking so much today, but in this one, I did play a principal role in it, so I guess I should do this. So a couple weeks ago, I had a sit-down meeting along with Chairman Larson, and at one instance, we looked over the goals and the goals report of our county administrator, and you've all seen those. It's lengthy. And it's a full report on the goals that we set for him that were in effect from March 1st of 2017 until February 28th of 2018. And each one of those goals were responded to by our county administrator in his report. And quite frankly, not one of those goals was anything other than successfully achieved. Our gentleman county administrator is a results-oriented guy, and if he has goals, those goals are going to be met, and he really did a good job. That wasn't the only part of the evaluation, though. So that's my statement on the goals, is that they've been reviewed. I think all of you have had the chance to review his report, and you can pose questions when I'm finished, but at least in my analysis, as well as in Chairman Larson's analysis, the goals were met. But we also have a evaluation form, and the evaluation form talks about his performance. And it looks at 6 different areas, and this is common with what we've done in the last several years. So each of these different 6 areas, we give our administrator a grade, and the grade is on a scale of 1 to 5, and curiously, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 3 3/4, and 5. I didn't figure that out. That was some guy in finance, I think, Bob. So with that type of grading system, first we just figured out whether or not our county administrator met our expectations, or if he exceeded or failed, and then we tried to apply the grade. So here's the first of the 6. The first of the 6 is leading change. And the prime example is this, the ERP program, which is a $2.5 million project for our county. Finance has it pretty well stored away, maybe with the exception of the CIP component. And HR is working on it, about, I think, 65% into it, and they're going to go live on it on July 1st. But it takes a lot of effort. And when you have that big of a fish to fry, it's like learning a brand new language, and I can imagine there's lots of complaining. Lots of complaining. And in this case, we all remained positive, and I think our administrator really has been a leader in getting us through this system. Now, we'll have to replace Bob with someone who quickly realizes that, well, this is a dynamic system, and your replacement will have to be up to the task too, Bob. But resilience was shown, vision towards getting it accomplished and on time and on budget has been shown. We gave our administrator a fully met our expectations, which is the 2.5. So if you're keeping grades, there's the first of the scores at 2.5. So that's on leading change. Number 2 is on leading people. Leading people. Well, on areas of study, such as the ERP, developing the new website, developing a branding, communications, how our administrator has performed there is that he has empowered teams of talented staff, giving those talented staff the means and the acknowledgement to perform, and isn't that what leading people is all about? But not every person that needs to be led is easily led, and there were some cases where maybe it has to be continued to be a work in progress between our administrator and perhaps a couple of our department heads. But all in all, I think we have a very superior leadership quality in our administrator, and I know that he's found a way to have Lisa Plunkett accept this new position as early as March 21st, and things seem to be falling into place. Results driven. As I mentioned before, all of those goals, my quote is he knocked them out of the park. One of the goals was the development of the CIP. And we never had that system before. So we never knew how to pay for all the infrastructure repairs, and instead they were left to decay. The can was kicked down the road, and now this board, together with our actions by our county administrator, we were able to attack those better than any other prior board. And his leadership in that regard to get the results done, to get that CIP passed, we felt exceeded our expectations. So in that regard, gave a 3.75 score. The one previous, the leading people, a 2.5. So we got two 2.5s and one 3.75. Now I did the math without a calculator, and then I redid it with the calculator, and I came out the same way both ways. But see if you come up with the same number as I did. Next, business judgment. Well, the ERP system should help us immensely in determining how much things are going to cost, but we already have been able to keep things on budget. No expensive overruns on the development of the nursing home. The IT department is stellar, and the investment into that worked out very well. Business judgment, I asked our county administrator what's being done proactively on the sexual harassment issue, and the response was, we're devoting resources to that. And you saw from Tara's report that, yeah, that's going to be part of the 2018 program, is to institute a training for all employees on sexual harassment. Our county administrator's response was, we have zero tolerance for harassment concerns. And I said, well, give me an example. And without naming names, there have been occasions where a harassment claim has come up, and those incidents were investigated diligently and fairly, and the person involved understands now that there are consequences too. So business judgment, well taken care of. We found that to be one of our county administrator's strengths, and again, another score of 3.75. The fifth area, building coalition. I think we're all aware that there's a certain political climate in the air right now in our country, in our state, and even in our county as we head in towards our election. Our county administrator knows that he needs to remain neutral to that, but is also willing to back this board on any resolution that we pass where we authorize him to do so. He hasn't been dictatorial. He's been very good at negotiating with department heads. Case in point, when a matter comes up to a committee, how often have you seen department heads arguing over policy when it gets to the committee? It's usually worked out. The county administrator's goal is to make sure that everybody's on the same page by the time we see it as committee members, and I think that's a great thing. The one concern that we talk to our administrator about is in communicating at the various towns and to perhaps get our county policy better understood by visiting the town meetings more often. We need to build coalition with all of our towns too. So that might be something we can look forward to when the next set of goals are set. So in the area of building coalition, just met expectations at 2.5, and that leaves us with strategic planning. Well, the goals don't just come up out of the blue. Strategic planning is part of how our county administrator has set the goals. He has used the department heads in determining what the best goals are going to be for the next couple years of our government. You've seen him deal with some of the issues such as the shortage in dispatcher personnel at the last budget. And he seems to be able to respond to that and get good support. So having our strategic plan in place and having it endorsed by our department head and our staff is very effective. And for that, in strategic planning, it's always a main concern for him, a 3.75 again. So we concluded with 3 exceeded expectations of 3.75 and 3 at 2.5. You add them all together, you divide by 6, and you get a score of 3.125, which is above a 3, which then gets us to our discussion about compensation. So a little background. Ever since 2013, our county administrator has had a base salary of $160,000. When we renewed his contract just in 2016, it was again set at $160,000, so no increase. There was a incentive bonus awarded previously. And now for this year, based upon his performance, there was an allowance in our budget for this current year of up to 2.5%, which would have been $4,000. But the same math that I took to task before, I concluded that, well, if he had hit all the goals, all 6, then perhaps we would award the full 2.5%, but meeting half of them, perhaps we would then award 1/2 of the balance, half of the bonus requested. So the bonus that administration committee authorized, and we had a discussion in closed session too, so I'm not going to get into all the details about that, but the $2,000 bonus would equal 1.25%, and it's not a salary increase, it's a one-time bonus. So it's a smaller bonus than was awarded to all the other employees, or a smaller pay increase, and this is just one time. So I think I'd like to recognize our county administrator's superior performance last year. Not a large bonus. Our county administrator is paid well as a county administrator. Our county can be proud of doing that because we've attracted a very good one and he stayed with us. So with that, we did spend, Chairman Larson, you and I spent at least an hour interviewing him together. You brought to that table information that, because you're running around this place all the time, I'm not. So I was the listening ears to what Roger had to say. And then our administrator left the meeting and Roger and I talked, and that's when we did the grading and we talked about the bonus. This was all then presented at administration committee, and they endorsed our recommendation that Roger and I had come up with, and that's before you now.
Now, are there any questions? Supervisor Nelson.
Yeah, Supervisor Stolberg, so you're saying it's just one time for 2018? Is this going to be like every year? Because I'm going to put my public sector hat on again. I don't know how many public sector people are getting bonuses, and especially the top level. I had a discussion earlier that I asked that question about my boss who worked over at the airport. My chief goes, he goes, it may have happened because they were pressed against in Minnesota. You couldn't get more money than the governor. And so they did things the other way. He goes, but he's not even sure that many public sectors do this anymore because of what, you can get that in the private sector. But it's to me, a lot of these things that we do, your goals and objectives, I think should be really part of your job and part of your compensation package. But that's my view of it. I've never been a huge proponent of that, being a public sector employee, because I always realize that I had job security, I had retirement, I had a pension, and I got some vacation. So that was a trade-off and not being able to negotiate bonuses. So that's the way I looked at it. But that's, that's just something to think about because, you just don't turn around the corner, there's a new county administrator. We don't need that. But it's not an attack on Pat. It's just the process, to me, of what we're looking at. And that's the thing that I would see. For one who's lived in that and dealt with doing union contract negotiations, because that usually a lot of times causes a lot of heartburn for employees. Employees who have been here for a lot of years and they've never had really an incentive. Actually, some of them were just fighting for their jobs when they had to pay for performance and things like that. So, I mean, that's just the way I look at it, right, wrong, or indifference, but that's how I feel.
Supervisor Hanson.
I'll support the bonus. I think Patrick's about the best administrator I've seen in my whole life in private industry and in my career in the government. I am grateful to you, Patrick, for accepting the steady and stagnant salary. It means a great deal to me because, as I've expressed to you, that it's important to hold that figure because it is about as much as we can afford, and I don't want to lose you. So I think it's a fair compromise.
Supervisor Peterson.
I support the bonus also. I think anything less would be treating him as a second-class citizen.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Not see. Supervisor Schoberg.
Just a quick response to Supervisor Nelson's comment. Not too many of our employees have employment contracts. We have an employment contract with our county administrator. In that contract, verbiage exists regarding the award of incentive compensation from time to time at the discretion of this board. Similar language was in that contract when he first came here, and that wasn't by me. That was other people, the previous chair to you. So that's why he came over here, is that there was that part of an expectation that if he performed, there might be something in it at the end of the year as a recognition piece. So that's the lay of the land, and I think the bonus is appropriate.
Any other discussion? Questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion on the second on the floor. We'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. We have a request here for future agenda items. Anybody have anything for a future agenda item? If you have any, just get those agenda items in to Pat or myself or Cindy. County Clerk's report? Nothing?
I will email out a schedule to all of you for the upcoming meetings in April and May, so you can get that on your calendar, just to let you know that.
Announcements? Sure.
Yep, one announcement. There will be a groundbreaking for the new highway facility on March 29th at 11 a.m. in the morning in Baldwin at the new site. We will be sending out a notice on this, but I wanted you to get it on your schedules for those board members that want to make it. March 29th at 11 a.m. in Baldwin. Correct, Robbie? Yep. Thank you.
Up here first, Supervisor Nelson.
What date is the employee recognition dinner in River Falls?
Tara? It's, what's the date? Of March? Or? Okay. At the West Winds Supper Club? At what time? 6? All right.
6.
Yep, thank you. And you'll all be getting a notice on that as well, too.
Supervisor Schober.
Yes.
That's
Nope.
open to
Wait.
county board members?
Yes, and encouraged to attend.
Yep. Supervisor Schoberg.
Just to stop and pause and recognize that we just conducted a public evaluation of our key employee, and I think it went well, and I think we should applaud.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other announcements?
Thanks, Tim.
Supervisor Hausner?
Mr. Chair, it's not an announcement, it's a thank you to our highway department folks, town officials that have been out on the roads and the municipalities. Mother Nature has not been kind to us the past month or so, but hats off to each one of these men and women for the great job that they're doing, making sure that our travels are safe and anyone coming through the county. So thank you to each and every one of you.
Any, Supervisor Babbitt?
Just very briefly, most of us in this room are up for reelection, including myself, and I wanted just to take the opportunity, recognizing the possibility, as in any election, of not being here come next May for our first board meeting with the new board. Just wanted to say how much I've appreciated the opportunity to work with all of you. I hope we'll all be back, but just in case we're not, I want to be sure you all know what a pleasure it's been serving with you, and I hope to be able to continue to do so. Thank you.
Any other? No other announcements? And I think we're concluded with our meeting. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.